All right, Brian. So I work for you and obviously for Greg. Chuck, you're in the same boat as me. You work for Brian and Greg. Brian, do we need to find new jobs?
Um, Probably.
It's not the answer I was looking
Question
for,
is,
but probably the one I expected. Why?
the question more of is when, and is there something that you can add that the machines can't add? The summary that we've been saying is something like this: AI enhances everyone's abilities, but knows how to use it well. What does that mean? That means if I go to AI and I'm a marketing professional, I ask it to generate copy in the style of, you know, Claude Hopkins about some sort of skin lotion for target avatar of, working moms that are super busy and to get ready but want, to be attractive to their spouse, whatever. Like, okay, you put in all this information, it's going to give you a letter. It's going to give you copy. It's going to give you headlines. It's going to give you marketing material. But if you're not good at marketing to begin with, you're not going to know if it's any good. And so there is still a level of, if I'm a developer, I can get out of different tools. I think Chuck would say maybe Claude is the best right now for that. Uh, However, I don't know if it's good code, if it's usable code, if it can fit into my system, if I have a full vision of it, if I haven't provided it for the AI. However, that doesn't mean nobody's going to lose their jobs. The reality is the best players, so let's just say everybody's skill levels on a 1 to 10 scale, the tens, nines, and eights are going to get three, four, 5 times more efficient depending on the industry. And the bottom half are just not going to be needed. So you either have to get your skill level up to 7, 8, right? That you're in the top 10 to 20% of everybody in your industry, or you're in trouble. So the question really is for you, Rob, are you and Chuck in the top 10 or 20% of your industry?
Let's leave that as a cliffhanger. We'll answer this at the end of the recording. Does anything on this chart surprise you? Like, what are we looking at here?
So this chart is showing the adoption of ChatGPT specifically. So not other large language models, but clearly they're the big player across industries. And so your biggest percentage wise total adoption is marketing professionals as far as using it at work, which is no surprise because clearly it's writing. I mean, it's words, it's used in language. So if you're in marketing and you're not using it, or you're not using it well, or to get a good marketer to begin with, so you have basic or no marketing skills, and you're like, oh, GPT, and I'm gonna become an awesome marketer. Like you'll go from a 1 to a 2, maybe a 1 to a 3, but you're not going to jump from a 3 to an 8. Like there is still skill you need giving you good quality information. An example of that would be why it's trained on what right. It's trained on all of the internet. The majority of the internet is not good marketing. It's not good copy. It's not good communication. It doesn't use strategies like neurolinguistic programming in these things. And so when it is just spitting something out, unless you're extremely specific and know what good marketing copy looks like, you might get a little bit better. Like if you're, it's going to help you be less terrible, but it's not going to make you a super marketer. If you're a brilliant marketer, your own custom GPTs or GPT assistants through OpenAI and train it, and that's when you start to get super efficient. Because once you have it trained with all of the skills and knowledge and persuasive techniques and psychological triggers that you know as a marketer are effective, then that GPT can spit out very high quality stuff. We use this internally. For instance, we take a company, help develop their UVP using AI. And once we have a unique value proposition or unique selling proposition, we then tailor that across not just their business, but each of their individual product lines. And so you have unique selling propositions. And then you have different content and ideas to go with that. Okay, well, in addition to this, we will offer these specials, 0% financing, or no payments for 60 days, or whatever it is. And you feed that all into the GPT, and then it helps you write whatever you want, email copy. And the more specific you are of, hey, this is a person that had an inquiry but hasn't yet met with any of our salespeople. Okay, this is a person that's met with the salespeople but haven't bought yet. They're still shopping around, and so on. But it's now on those things. Software journalists, I mean, all of these people, the journalist one kind of scares me, to be frank, because there's a lot of accuracy issues. with GPTs. We ran into this when we wrote our book, that they would spit out information that looked convincing and sounded very similar. For instance, if you said, give me quotes about AI from Nick Bostrom or something like that, it would give you quotes and you'd be like, oh yeah, it definitely is Nick Bostrom. And then you go look it up and it's like, wait a second, that wasn't actually a quote. It was like a summary. And it was a good summary and it was accurate as far as their thoughts and beliefs. It just wasn't an actual quote, yet it claimed it was. And so that's where, journalists, I hope they're being very careful with how they use that. Teachers, I think they're underutilizing it of only 38%. There's so many ways teachers can be using that in new tools that can come out. Where's do you have any medical professionals in here?
What professionals?
Medical, doctors, nurses,
Oh,
zero. They're not
yeah,
even they don't exist.
well,
So
that's
that's
tough.
mind-boggling.
Is it too dangerous for
So
medical professionals to be using it if it hallucinates? Do you think it's too early?
I don't know. Based on the advice I've gotten from my own doctors, I would be perfectly happy with hallucinations.
yeah, I kind of agree with Chuck. It's too dangerous not to use it. See,
Yeah,
here's the thing that if you know how to use it properly, it can be very safe. What do I mean by that? Well, if you want evidence-based suggestions and it says, hey, this is a treatment for, acid reflux with natural remedies instead of using Prilosec. Okay, well, that's interesting. You said I need this, this, and this. Where's the evidence? Show me the studies. Show me the research that backs that up, and it'll give you links. Now you go read the studies. Did they summarize them well? Did they not summarize them well? Who knows? But if you go to your doctor and say, "Hey, are there any alternatives to Prilosec?" I think that's the treatment for acid reflux. I could be wrong, but we'll just go. Uh, they're going to say, "No, this is the treatment."
right.
Right? No, this is what the FDA has approved for treatment for this thing. This is what you get. Right? Well, I don't really want that. All right, well then deal with the problem. Okay, just don't eat spicy foods. Okay, is there anything else I can do? No. Like there's the ability to have an empathetic conversation with the AI that's willing to go down whatever rabbit hole you want, but then require it to provide the proof, require it to provide the evidence. You don't want it to summarize a bunch of functional medicine blogs that are completely anecdotal and have no real science behind them, but there's a lot of them. And this is truth. But you can force it not to by asking, show me the evidence, link to the scientific, link to the reports, use their specific, like the consensus app, GPT, and there's other ones out there that literally will only search scientific studies. They do have their own limitations. That might be a whole different discussion, but they're only trained to read the abstracts, not the actual research, which is a big problem because they don't always correlate. Um, but to say, hey, we're just not going to use it, I mean, that's just absurd. The other thing beyond that, I think we've done a whole talk on the medical side of it. If I have my entire medical history fed into a GPT, it's going to find connections between things that happened 20 or 30 years ago, or things in my diet, or things in my workout routine, or my biometrics, right? That a doctor doesn't even have the time, yet alone the resources to maintain or keep up with all of that. That's where the game really starts to change. So the fact that none of them are, maybe they just didn't ask any, like, which is, why wouldn't you ask doctors and nurses? That doesn't make sense to me, but that's crazy. I think the bigger point here, getting to your question, Rob, is will you be replaced was your specific question, but will anybody be replaced? Is anybody being replaced by AI? There's a lot of people that say no, that's not going to happen. That humans are unique, and we do believe humans are unique, but not for the same reasons that usually they're replacing jobs. We have built machines that are able to think at a certain level. Do they have free will? Do they have moral reasoning? That's a whole different discussion. But for instance, let's look at one company here. Shopify has been consistently laying off people, small amounts here in 2022, 10% of their workforce later in 2022, then 20% of their workforce, a little over Q2 of 2023. Yikes. Well, usually when companies lay off people, it's because they have some financial issues and they need to cut the expenses and get things back in line for their shareholders. I'm sure that's the case with Shopify. Wait a sec. It doesn't seem to be the case with Shopify. 5.6 billion in revenue in 2022, which was an increase of 1 billion, an increase of almost 25% in revenue when they started these layoffs. Since then, they added another 1.5 billion, almost 1.4 billion in 2023, middle of 2023, which will go off. It's like the less people have, the more sales they generate. That's not normal. That's an interesting correlation there. And then today, their stock's up 22%. Why is their stock up 22%? Oh, they just beat estimates as they roll out AI tools to their customer base. So anybody that says, "Oh yeah, AI is not replacing anybody's jobs," I would say, look at that and tell me that you don't think there's an AI component, that they're getting more done, they're servicing more customers, generating more revenue as they lay off people. Now, is that a wise move? That's a whole different discussion. Maybe we can go down there because I'm not sure that's the move or the best move they could do. But to just purely say, hey, they're not seeing efficiencies where they can use artificial intelligence to replace people is not reality. Tyler Perry abandoned an $800 million project basically because of Sora. So he's planning on building an $800 million studio. Saw Sora and was like, in Sora, if you're not familiar with it, it creates videos using AI with just simple prompts so that you can create commercials or whatever else with virtually no cost. So why was he going to create a studio where people can record videos and movies and all these things when AI can do it for you? So did anybody lose their job there? No, but tens of thousands never got a job because of it. So that's another angle to consider from that one. Chuck, Greg, Rob, any feedback on that?
Well, what happens now then? So if you just flip back to the first chart that you had about the different industries. Yeah, that one. So in terms of layoffs, who should be worried? I guess the light blue, definitely. The middle blue, almost certainly.
Yeah, so anybody that's over 50%, and I think the date on this, if I recall correctly, was January of 2024.
Mhm.
So almost certainly the adoption is increased, unless people, again, if you're poorly trained and don't know how to use them, and you get a few hallucinations and you don't know how to clarify the hallucinations by forcing it to provide proof and evidence for you, then you might abandon it. And I think certainly that's going to happen. But over time, you're going to learn that's not the case. That's like the person that used the internet back when it was dial-up and was like, this is too slow. I'm never going to use the internet again. All right, fair enough. It was quirky, but you're not going to abandon the internet forever because of that. It's going to improve. Standing of it's going to improve, and you're going to still be using it. So there might be a little bit, but the reality is it's just going to keep going up. Legal professionals, teachers, like are totally underutilized right now. They will get higher. This is the one Greg and I spent some time looking at the financial advisor side on how they've been using AI. All of the big hedge funds, the ones that you can't get into because you don't have enough money, that have had returns for decades, all of them are using AI.
Not necessarily ChatGPT in this case. So this is this, but they're use even like the energy industry, the selling of buying of energy stuff. Like I've been talking to people before who literally they just hire AI experts, whether it's machine learning or whatever, to just get that extra edge, that 1%, that 5%. Yeah, to make billions off of it.
Yeah, so the point there, that's an excellent point, Greg. So they may not be using GPT because GPT isn't good enough. But if they're investing billions of dollars, you better believe they have the best machine learning practitioners in the world that they can find and afford, help figure out where and when to invest. So this chart's going to be a little bit skewed to that. I think marketing is the clear, like, you better be using AI, you better be good at it. You also better be educating yourself on what good marketing looks like. Journalists, I'm not entirely sure what they mean by journalists and how they're using it. There are some ways to use it effectively for fact checking. You could use it for writing. I think a lot of, I don't know if this is the case, Chuck or Greg, you might have found this, or are big magazines and news organizations allowing AI written articles, or do they require some sort of disclosure?
They do require disclosures, and there's been a lot of backlash. I mean, Sports Illustrated tried some AI authors, and they were,
That's right.
yeah, it went all bad for them. But I think that's the problem. They're trying to replace people. It's better if you have a journalist who is using AI to write the article rather than having a robot write the article. It's a perception thing at that point. Does that make sense?
So
Because
did Sports Illustrated lay people off? I think they did, right?
yeah, I don't know if that was necessarily related to the AI stuff as much as
Okay.
just general mismanagement. But I think the key here, you know, I don't know. I don't know. It's complicated.
Well,
I have talked to, I think, someone who works at one of the big New York publishing, I don't know, New York Post, New York Times, whatever. It says they have tested out AI content. At one thing, she said it's better than people. At other points, it's worse than some people. So that kind of gives you an idea of your threes and fours are probably going to be replaced. Your eight and nines are not, but they still used human editors, human review process. So it's really, they're not just saying, oh, write this and publish. It's still write this, edit, go back and tweak it, re-edit it, rewrite it, and go about that process.
right, but all of that, I mean,
I,
Chuck, you can speak to that. What can you do with that?
well, okay, there's lots of steps in the process where people can use AI, but I don't think that we're ever going to be in a world where magazine articles are written just by robots and spit out continuously, happy with that content. It's all about cult of person. Okay, look at your different news media and then look at your journalists. People tie into the journalists. Remember the days of Dan Rather? People were all into Dan Rather, Dan Rather, Dan Rather. It's a name thing. It's a name thing. It's a name thing. Even when Dan Rather did bad, it was all Dan Rather. People still remember Dan Rather as being good, despite the things that happened at the end of his career. It's a cult of personality and it's branding. And that's always going to be important with journalism. People are going to tie into those journalists that they agree with. They have to have something to agree with, whether it's NBC as a brand name or it's Jahanle or whoever their uh, author is or journal is on the page. People tie into things. They become followers. That's why Rush Limbaugh, he was a journalist. People tied into Rush Limbaugh. He didn't start off with his EIB network back in the day. He was just Joe Schmo on the radio, but it turned into something because of cult of personality. That's what
Chuck,
journalism is all.
do you think that's still as important now as the media outlet itself? Like, do you think people are more attached to the journalist now or more attached to an outlet?
No, people are always at brands. And I will show you this with influencers. Look at how many popular AI influencers are out there. And that's because it's a branding difference. When people look for the news, they look for real, they want a person. When people are looking for entertainment, they don't care. They want to be entertained. That's why you see AI influencers rising up and becoming popular, and you won't see AI journalists becoming popular. Two different things.
So, Chuck,
Lose my connection.
yeah, it seems like it's skipping a little bit here, but
All locked up.
so from a marketing and a psychology perspective, I totally get that. Oh, we lost Chuck. Hopefully he rejoins us here.
You can continue that train of thought.
Oh,
I feel like Greg can answer for Chuck.
yeah, that's probably true. So from a marketing perspective and psychology, the connection to another human being, I think, makes sense. You see this all the time, and politics is your best example. I support X politician, right? And then you say to them, politician said X, Y, and Z. And you're like, oh, sorry, it wasn't actually that one. It's the politician you hate said that, right? Or vice versa. And so if I trust Don Lemon, I trust Don Lemon. Do I fact check him? Do I what? No, I trust him. Right. Now he could be wrong 9 out of 10 times, he could be wrong 6 out of 10 times, whatever. But on the other side, if I trust, I don't know, Glenn Beck, all right, well, maybe he's wrong 6 out of 10 times, but I trust him, so I'm going to assume that he's right. And so people, what we do as a species is we outsource most of our thinking. And that's where Chuck's talk brands, I think, makes sense. That like, if I trust this brand, NBC or Fox or then I assume and I outsource my efforts to fact check and look into it to them because I trust them. Or if I, again, it could be an individual human being. The challenge that I think that I would ask, have isn't that trust actually placed at any level? Like, can we actually trust the news media and these journalists? And is there an increasing awareness that really can't, that would lend people to say, okay, if I go and I'm researching a topic and I have a nuanced conversation with a GPT, it's 100% of the time better than if I went and read 10 articles from both sides of the aisle, right? The GPT is, it's not unbiased for sure, like, but it's at least um, a more nuanced than I see in anywhere in the mainstream media. And that's why you see alternative medias and things like that pop up to some degree, even your influencers, like you said, Chuck. But then I'm just going from a big name, a CNN, whatever, to a local influencer that's on YouTube, and I'm still outsourcing my trust and ability to think. Is that going to be better ultimately than an AI if it's not fine to be biased? Which again, it's always going to be fine-tuned to be biased. Why? Because the people controlling it are biased. How do you get unbiased people? You don't get unbiased people. Unbiased people don't exist. Because that's not a thing. And so, and then you take it to the, well, if it was completely unbiased, it would teach you how to make a nuclear bomb or something like that, right? Sort of. I mean, that's not exactly bias. That's a little bit different. But the way that you get rid of misinformation or disinformation is you allow all information, right? You allow the idiocy to expose itself. So you don't squash Nazism or eugenics or these things by not allowing discussion about them. You allow them to make their arguments, and then you point out why they're so ridiculous and why they're so wrong.
Get you scared of the conversation, right?
Right. And so an AI actually has the ability to allow us to do that. Whereas if I go on, I don't know, some show and say, on Don Lemon and I say capitalism is good or Glenn Beck and communism is good or whatever, they're just going to shout and yell and they're not going to listen. There's no conversation. But if I do it with an AI, maybe I do have a conversation that actually has some nuance to it. It'll be biased and you have to recognize that it's biased, but you can essentially ask it questions to go against its own bias.
Part of our problem is we love drama. I mean, we love drama. We're going to find drama in all kinds of things. And I can give you a great example of something that somebody in the media would explode over. Okay. So tell them about the president stuff. I was having ChatGPT list out the US presidents and some details on them. And it went through all of them in blocks of 10. And the very last president was Kamala Harris. Now, if you took this to the media, you could make all kinds of arguments for this thing, how it's a bias and blah, 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 and how ChatGPT is by the Democrats or something like that. I wanted to know why it said that. And it took a little while for the conversation to go. But you know what I discovered on why it picked Kamala Harris? Because statistically, if you look back over our history of vice presidents, and you look at vice president end up running for president, they end up statistically getting into office. So making a bet that after Joe Biden's next term, she would be the next president. It was just taking a statistical guess. It's just based on numbers.
I don't know if that's accurate simply because it'll make up an answer.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, I believe 100% of the presidents who skipped a turn and then reran also won. I think it was Grover Cleveland, maybe. So statistically speaking, this has only happened one other time before, and that guy won.
Teddy skipped. Teddy Roosevelt skipped and then tried to run under the Bull Moose Party and lost.
Well, okay, well, there's a party might be an example.
Almost won though. He actually did really well in that.
But I think Cleveland was the one that ran twice in two separate things.
Yeah,
I don't know. We can look at that up. Don't quote me exactly on that. But my point is, I doubt that statistically it did the math. I think it probably tried to justify itself after you had the conversation.
But why do you think it put it there?
Why do I think? Well, the reality is we'll never know because it doesn't know.
We actually do know. It's just a recognition. It's just pattern completion. And
Right, but you can't go into the pattern and find, hey, this is the point where it.
I would say logically, I can buy into the logic there. That's statistically, I can buy that as an excuse a lot more than I can buy the excuse that OpenAI is gearing things or answers towards the Democrats or something like that, because it's just not logical a lot of ways. But
Well, so let's look at the counter potential argument there.
the training data would say that Kamala Harris is the next logical president.
All right, but here's a counter you could take from that, Chuck. Let's say we have 5 major news organizations, right? Let's say 4 of them are pro-Democrat, 1 of them's pro-Republican.
Okay.
Let's say that I have I've fine-tuned my model to say not all resources of information are equal, that some resources are more trustworthy than others. Right? So now I've said the New York Times is more trustworthy than the New York Post. The Washington Post is more trustworthy than, well, I don't know what the Washington Examiner, I think it's called, right? And so we have this of CNN is more trustworthy than Fox. And now the system says, okay, what are all of the resources saying? Who is the most likely president and so on. And so it's just statistically saying, I'm reading the current news. The current news, as far as the most trusted resources that you're fine tuning told me was the most trusted, or most reliable, says she's going to be the president, and therefore I'm going to say that. And then when you question me, well, I come up with some statistical thing, but in reality, I was just reading the current news.
You wouldn't read the current news though. It doesn't have access to data after April of 2023.
GPT doesn't?
Unless it specifically goes out and searches. Yeah.
Was it searching?
Reading cutoff date, Greg, do you know?
I forget. They changed it, but it seems earlier 2020, late 2023, early 2024, I believe that now.
No, it's late. I think it's late 2023, like November or something, because I think it's just gotten the information on the October 7th attack.
All right, guys, I'm going to pull this back slightly because we got into this by looking at one particular industry, and the chart originally was showing who was using it across which industries, who wasn't using it, I guess more importantly. But then, Brian, you went to a screen that showed layoffs from the tech industry over the last, it looked like the last 4 years at least of data. So I feel like that's important because you can see some names that people recognize. And I just want to get your guys' predictions for what is going to happen for the rest of the year and into 2025. Like, what's the runway for people, especially if you're in the tech industry or you are a teacher or a marketing expert? What are you guys saying is going to happen, and what should people be doing?
Yeah, this chart, look at it's by month. Late 2022 was sort of the biggest layoffs. 2023 started tapering down, but then January of 24, with Intel laying off, I think 15,000 people, that number jumped back up since they were about half. And this year, it's been up and down compared year over year. Some months this year were more layoffs, some were less. Overall, though, because the beginning of 2023 had a few massive layoffs, 24 has had less. But they still keep coming, which is an interesting data point, because most of these companies are still doing financially well. Your Microsofts and Amazons and so on. So one thing that I'll point out before we go into the predictions, one of the things that we've claimed and said, I think we might even say this exact phrase in the book, is your stockbroker is more at risk of losing their job than your barber. Cars are assembled by robots, but they're fixed by humans.
Mhm.
And it's something to keep in mind. However,
Well,
every industry, like roofing right now, there's robots out there that are going to replace roofers, which is going to be amazingly formative because it has extremely high insurance costs. It's actually hard to find people that want to go up on a roof in 90-degree weather in the summer and work 14 hours a day. Like, it's not a glamorous job. It's dangerous. Your workers' comp claims, all these things. So if you can just put a robot, and the ones I saw climb the ladders and go up on the roof and start laying down your shingles, the costs, whether they actually drop or they just massively increase their profits, we yet to see, are almost certainly going to change. And if you talk or in the roofing industry, which I have, it's just hard to find employees. So there's a subset of the market, like nobody wants to do these jobs. And whether that's bad is a different question. But these roads are getting
yeah,
better. Well, what is going on here? Oh, geez.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's per new ads, obviously, because you wanted that.
they're gonna work. I don't even know. There we go.
Building cars, baby. Let me look at those.
What are we looking at, Brian? Is this a real thing? Or is this a render?
Oh yeah,
It is. You're about to see where they're using it currently.
too, man.
So this is an actual auto manufacturing facility, or at least somewhere where they're testing it out. I don't know if it's on the production line yet.
It's probably a development production line, test line thing, experimental thing.
Oh, it does say production line.
Why do they always have to make them like humans? It's so creepy. Like, I just feel it's unnecessary.
There's a reason behind that, and the company writes about that. I can explain that for this one. Like Brian was suggesting that the roofing robot, it doesn't look like a human. It doesn't have human capability. It's literally only good at doing roofing, climbing a ladder.
Looks like a big
That's it.
Roomba.
Like, nothing else. Yeah, basically that's it. It's a big Roomba. And so that this company's philosophy is you can make 1 million of these task-specific AI robots, or you can make that humans basically mimics a human, which can do all these things already. So basically make one that can do everything. And they believe humans are the best representation of that. It's a good representation. There's probably better ways you can do it. Obviously, they have the dogs with machine guns on their backs, which would be way better than a human version of that. But that's why they went into making it human-like, because they think it can actually do more capability things, more
More
stuff
general
with
purpose.
one specific robot. Yeah, more general purpose.
Tell you what, I'm gonna make a prediction about these tech layoffs. All right, I think the more people they lay off in tech, the more demand there's going to be for tech workers. I think you lay off 15,000, there's going to be 17,000 people hired. I would venture to say that if you look at tech hiring over the last 12 months, you'll see an explosion in it.
I think that's still an early curve type thing, meaning like people are just still trying to figure the tech, right? And then some do layoffs and some haven't. And
let me explain this, because as companies start to embrace tech, they need more people on their own staff that can actually handle it. When you're talking about things like developers, software developers who work for these big giant companies, they're a dime a dozen, man. Those guys are they're just earning their chops in the industry by working for the big guys. Only a very small percentage of those people will ever get to the they're the lower part of it. But it's okay. They've learned that's a training job for them. They get fired or laid off from this, and then they go work for a small insurance company, or they work for a car dealership, or they go work for a local retail store of some kind. And you know what? There's big demand for that because people have to have their computers fixed. People have to have their phones fixed. People have to figure out how to install this. They have to figure out, how do I do this? How do I do that? And who do they get to do that? They get tech workers to do that. Now, it's often referred to people as being software developers, but anybody who works in this industry for any length of time understands that being a software developer involves a lot more than just writing software. So I think the more laying off at these big companies, the more you're going to see companies hiring tech workers.
Yeah, which might not reflect in resources like this because you're saying they're not tech workers are not getting hired in tech companies, they're getting hired
Oh yeah,
at
no.
retail or
Tech workers don't work for.
healthcare or yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, it's hard to say if that has started.
The majority of software developers don't actually build the kind of software that gets released to the public. They build things like access database things for their company to access this or that, or they build a system to access old microfilm things because they just need that little tool. They're guys that just hit piece and patch, piece and patch. They're not building
Yeah, it
that
looks like overall the
to get VC money. The vast majority of software developers aren't that at all.
the tech industry overall has been pretty flat for the last few years, but that's just the tech industry, not, this is if I'm understanding this correctly, not all tech jobs. So if I'm an IT guy at a high school, I'm not reflected in this. I
You know,
think there's also research, I
popular.
don't know if I can find it or not. It shows that companies who perform layoffs perform worse over the long term in terms of performance. And that I think it's more to what Chuck was saying is like, hey, I don't know if this is a wise decision. And why isn't it wise? What is the goal of a company and leadership in a company? At some level, it's to people feel safe. What does that mean? Well, if I want innovative people, if I want innovation and new ideas, which if you're a tech company, that's what you have to have. I know that I can screw up and not get fired. I need to know I can push the limits and not and I need to know that I can come up with new concepts and ideas and go outside the box in these types of things and have support even if it fails. Right. And yeah, there's some stories of 3M and others like that that have these mavericks that go outside and their boss said they couldn't do it and their boss's boss said they couldn't do it and they did it anyway and then it became a post-it note and it's $1 billion business. And so it actually tells those types of stories whenever people get onboarded at their company. What do layoffs say? Particularly if you do it like Google and send an email out to people and wait a sec, you cancel their email account before they even open the email to see it. It says you don't matter. You are just a cog in a wheel. I'll just get a new cog if I need one. Your humanity, your life outside of work, anything else that's important, nope. You're just here for us to churn out whatever widgets. It could be AI widgets, it could be physical widgets, whatever. And that's all that matters. Well, how much loyalty do you think that breeds? If I see that Shopify just laid off 30% of their workforce in the last year and a half, and I'm looking for a new tech job and I'm a brilliant machine learning programmer, am I going to go to say, you know what, Shopify is really the place I want to go? Oh, what about Google? Well, they're laying off people too via email. Oh, that's the place I want to go. Nope. You're going to go to maybe some new startup or some other place where you say, at least they don't have a history of just laying off people in these terrible, unprofessional ways. And so over the long term, and I think this is again to your point, Chuck, the losing of the human capital and the talent and the abilities that are going to help you continue to evolve the AI, those 8s and 9s and 10s, even if you manage to lay off only 4s and 5s in your mass layoffs, let's just say you had some algorithm and you figured that out. Great. The 8s and 9s and 10s saw that. They saw what you did to their friends. They know their friend isn't a great programmer. They know they're not a 10, but they know that they're a human being and they know they had 3 kids and they know that they're about to take a vacation or whatever, and you just harmed their family and their life. You're gonna breed discontent.
changes your perception.
And that's the best people who have the option to go work wherever they want are looking at much more than just the money. And the money will be out there anyway. It's now, who can I trust? Who can I be loyal to? Who's going to let me do the innovative things? Where can I feel safe that I can push these limits and help them replace me to some degree? Because if you're doing AI properly, you're going to be using it to replace your job, and yet still then find the next innovation that says, yep, I'm going to stay here, be successful.
Should we wrap it there?
Sure.
Feels like we should. All right.